It's funny how sometimes the Bible can seem to have an upside down way of looking at the world. It reminds me of something that I one time saw on a show. I don't know if you ever watched a show called Stranger Things. Stranger Things is a story that tells a story of a group of kids dealing with monsters that come from this alternate dimension known as the Upside Down. And if you're familiar with the show, great. If not, I can explain it to you real quick. It's just basically that there's this dimension where everything in their world is in that dimension as well. It's just everything is backwards. In their world, everything is light and green and nice. In this alternate dimension, everything is flipped on its head and it's dark and it's scary. In a lot of ways, I think that's kind of what happened to our world. I mean, we live in a world that God created to be perfect and to be good. And then sin came along and it flipped everything over on its head. I remember one time someone said it's as if the devil went around the world and just started switching all the price tags. And all the stuff that isn't that big a deal, he put a bigger price tag on, so it seems like it is a big deal. And all the stuff that is a big deal, he put a lower price tag on, so it doesn't seem like as big a deal. It's as if we live in a world where everything is flipped on its head. You see, in the Bible study we're going to be going through, and in the book that you're going to have an opportunity to consider if you choose to read through the book, we're going to have an opportunity to talk about 9 different ways that the way of life as a Christian seems upside down to our world. But who is it that's upside down? You'll have a chance, for example, when we begin our lesson, to look at the Sermon on the Mount and just go through the list and just ask yourselves how backwards Jesus sounds. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are persecuted. Those are the kinds of people we pity, not the kind of people we look up to. And yet, who is it that's looking at the world backwards? All over the Bible, you see God making this point. And in 1 Corinthians, Paul makes the point this way. It says, "For it's written, I'll destroy the wisdom of the wise, the intelligence of the intelligent I will frustrate." Where is a wise person? Where is a teacher of the law? Where is a philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. You see, oftentimes the way God works seems backwards. He chooses things that look foolish to share his wisdom. He chooses things that look weak to show his power. But ultimately, it's us who are upside down, not our God. In each of the lessons throughout the study, we're going to look at a different way that as Christians, we look at the world in a way that makes it seem like it's upside down, but in reality, it just reflects just how twisted this world has become. And the one we're going to look at today is what maybe seems obvious, but I think is very counterintuitive. That God doesn't believe in us. It's the other way around. And we know that, but think about it. And I think the New Year is a great time to consider that. I remember one time reading the 10 Commandments of the New Year's, and I had found these in a couple different places, and they're not meant to be literal necessarily, but I think they do convey my point. Kind of tongue-in-cheek, someone once wrote this about the 10 Commandments of the New Year's. Thou shalt love yourself. Thou shalt believe in yourself. Thou shalt chase your dreams. Thou shalt be successful. Thou shalt set boundaries for thy neighbor. Thou shalt be skinny. Thou art thy problem, and thou art thy solution. Thou shalt keep the rules you make for yourself. Thou shalt be the best version of yourself. Thou shalt refuse to accept anything less than what you deserve. Now maybe there are some you'd add. Maybe there are some you'd change. But you notice that maybe it does kind of reflect the way we can look at life. As if we've got all this inner potential and all we've really got to do is kind of polish around the edges. All we've got to do is try to do a little rehabilitation project, just fix a few things. And then we can really be the kind of people that God can believe in, as if God is waiting for us to unlock our inner potential. But that's not the story. That's not how it goes. The Bible says over and over we are lost, that it's God who we rely on. You see, we're going to see in some of the passages at the end of our study that God isn't trying to fix us. He wants to make us brand new. And oftentimes the way he gets us to come to grips with this is through discipline. Consider what he says in Hebrews chapter 12. It says, "And you have completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son. It says, 'My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you. Because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Endure hardship as discipline, for God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father?'" Ever consider how you define a good year? Like as you sit on the verge of 2025, what is it that will make a good year for you? What are the things you're looking for? What are the goals you're setting for yourself? What are the touch marks, the things you hope to achieve? How do you define them? And how much of that is God's will and how much of that is our will? And how important it is for us to keep those two straight. You see, oftentimes the way God teaches us, the way he makes us brand new, is to give us what we would call failure. And you're going to have an opportunity perhaps in your growth group to look at the story of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 4 and ask yourself at the end of that section, did Nebuchadnezzar just have himself a good year or a bad year? And what would happen had he not had the year that God gave him? What an important thing it was for him to face failure, for him to realize the difference between his will and God's will. You maybe will have an opportunity to look at the story of Solomon. And with Solomon, God does something almost the opposite. He gives him a very good year, more than just 1 year. He gives him all the things he ever hoped for, and it becomes Solomon's misery. You see, in one way or another, God has a way of teaching us the difference between his will and our will. You see, God isn't here to fix us. He's not here to make us a little better. Instead, he comes through water and word to make us brand new. And as you look at the passage at the end of our study, you'll have an opportunity to see what that means. That we have a God who doesn't believe in us, but we believe in him. He's faithful when we are faithless, someone we can depend upon. That we'll have an opportunity to see that he didn't come to give us a whole bunch of rules, but to set us free, to be the people he's called us to be, to see that we're not defined by how well we hit our goals, we're not defined by how well we follow the rules we set for ourselves, but we're defined by the perfect life, sin, and death of Jesus, by an identity that's all wrapped up in him. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have New Year's resolutions. Of course you can. It doesn't mean you shouldn't address bad habits. Of course you should. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to find ways of serving God in the life God's put in front of you. But if we focus our eyes first on Jesus, and then as it says in Hebrews, run the race marked out for us, it's a totally different thing than to somehow live in the lie that God believes in us, somehow believe that there's some inner potential in us we have to unlock, and that our Christian life is just about polishing around the edges. No, God's made you brand new in the waters of your baptism, given you a new identity in him. God's blessings as you consider this upside down reality.